There is no machine more complex and lesser understood than the human body, made from 206 bones, 79 on average organs, 6 pints of blood, and about 8 pounds of skin. Our body has been fundamental to our success as the dominant species on this planet. Eyes just sharp enough to make us deadly predators, skin just flexible enough to not easily break, and a brain which commonly ranks as the most complex computer known to man. There are many things our species has achieved, and many that we haven't. But what about those which we cannot? What are the absolute limits of our body, ones that there is simply no way to breach? And, well, who are the extraordinary people who broke or fell afoul of these limits? Well, welcome to today's video, where it's time for us to see what those limits are. The average adult brain weighs in at around 1.4 kilograms, making up 2% of a person's total body weight. In many ways, though, a person is their brain, as it runs every system in their body, and both the legal and medical tests for death are only met when the brain loses all function. So you'd be forgiven for thinking that with all our advanced science, we understand the single most important part of our body, but you'd be absolutely wrong. We roughly know which areas of the brain do what, kind of, but we know really little else. We don't know why each area of the brain does what it does. We don't know how each area of the brain does it. We don't know how the brain is able to repair itself. And we have absolutely no clue as to how the brain stores information. And that leads us to the very first limit on human potential. What is the most information that a brain can hold? Well, firstly, we must ask whether there is a limit. And to answer that, we have to know how the brain actually stores information. And to answer that, we must go even deeper into the science. Brains are comprised of neurons and synapses. Neurons are clumps of cells that generate electrical signals and then pass those signals onto other neurons or muscular cells through the use of a synapse. It is this process that enables all of human activity and memory. In memory specifically, it is the neuron that stores the information, and then the synapse which motions that information into some form of action, such as a reflex or speaking. It is through this understanding that scientists worked out the estimated data limit of the human brain by calculating how many neurons the average brain has, and then calculating roughly how much data any single neuron stores. In their answer, scientists concluded that the average capacity of a human brain is 2.5 petabytes, each petabyte being equal to 1,000 terabytes, each of which is equal to 1,000 gigabytes, which in turn is equal to 1,000 megabytes, with, well, lots and lots of bytes from then downwards. Now, of course, it doesn't need to be pointed out that a human brain is not a binary computer, and as such, this is only a rough approximation of what the human brain can store. So to demonstrate what this looks like, let's look at some of the most extraordinary feats of memory ever recorded. Now, specifically, there are 2 world records relevant to our current question. The record for the most amount of information remembered from only one viewing, and the record for the most decimal points of pi remembered in the correct order recited at once. The first is a measure of how good the brain is at taking in information and storing it, being tested through setting out playing cards from a number of decks in a random order, and then demanding a contestant to state the exact order the cards were played in. The second, on the other hand, is a measure of how much information the human brain can store where the intake time is not artificially limited, and contestants for this record often spend years and sometimes even decades attempting to memorize pi, the mathematical constant that is used to calculate the ratio circumference-diameter of circles. So with that in mind, what do these records look like? Well, the first is owned by a Canadian man named Dave Farrow, who achieved it in 1997, where over the course of 9 hours he recited without any errors the exact order of 52 shuffled decks, equaling around 2,704 cards. Now, if you think that's a lot to remember, well, you've seen nothing yet, since the most digits of pi ever remembered correctly in order was set at 100,000 on October 3rd, 2006 by Akira Hamaguchi. If that makes you feel bad about your memory, though, I'm afraid it only gets worse. You see, Akira is quite a show-off, and he only stopped at 100,000 because he got tired after spending 16 hours reciting pi. He has claimed to be capable of reciting up to 111,706 digits of the number. Now, there is no way to work out exactly how much of the 2.5 petabytes Hamaguchi used through remembering those 100,000 points of pi, but scientists have estimated that only a handful of people would be capable of using that much of the total capacity. In fact, no person except for Akira Hamaguchi has ever successfully recited more than 67,890 digits of pi. So, we have found our first limitation in our brain. But what about our very cells themselves? Is there a theoretical limit to how long our cells can support life? Unfortunately, for any hopeful cryogenic supporter or otherwise immortality-inclined individuals out there, the answer is yes. A May 2021 study looked at this exact issue. Specifically, they took blood samples from 500,000 subjects over the course of a few decades, each time looking at how the cell's ability to repair themselves was changing. This is a part of the same process through which every cell in the human body dies and replaces itself relatively commonly, with most estimations stating that every 7 years, every single cell in your body has been replaced. The analysts looking at the data wanted to figure out whether there was a limit to this, a point where the cells would simply die and not be replaced. Through this dataset, they estimated that the point of total cell death with no renewal for an average person would range from 120 to 150 years of age, and when compared to the list of oldest living people of all time, this appears to match up, with only 63 people ever verifiably living beyond the age of 115, with a French lady named Jeanne Calmet holding the absolute record as the oldest person to ever live in recorded history, passing away in 1997 at the age of 122. But this might be one of those occasions where the limit is not actually the limit. In recent years, there have been studies in scientific innovation around a potential cure for aging. Specifically in 2022, scientists found that they were able to artificially extend the lifespan of mice by up to 60% through the use of a drug called rapamycin. However, this was not able to extend the lives of the mice indefinitely, with every single one instead dying of some form of cancer. This is where we meet the upper limit of human age. Cancer has been an unfortunate fact of life for all of human existence, but has only really begun to be noticed in any detail over the last 100 years. This is primarily because of our explosion in life expectancy, and the primary risk factor for cancer is aging. But why is that? So this video is not only going to speak about biology, psychology, neuroscience, and mathematics, but also physics, specifically the Big Bang. When the Big Bang happened, a lot of matter and energy was released. Included in that energy was radiation. This is the cosmic background radiation, often understood as the static on a radio-powered TV when you don't tune it properly. This radiation is everywhere in the universe, and we humans are pelted with it 24/7. It is this radiation that places the absolute limit on human age. For even if we could exclude our cell death and exclude all the more harmful forms of radiation, such as alpha, beta, and gamma ray radiation, there is no known or theorized way that we would be able to block or avoid cosmic background radiation. This has led scientists to estimating that no matter what advancements we make, no individual susceptible to any form of cancer would ever be capable of living beyond 4,000 years of age, by which point the radiation would have eaten away at the creature's cells so much that they simply would not be able to function. Still though, the average life expectancy in 1400 was 48. In the modern day, it's 72, and in many countries, it even reaches as high as the 80s. So who knows, maybe one day we'll find a way around that pesky spectre of cancer. So we've covered the most basic limitations on the human brain and the cells that make up our bodies, but what about the more fun limits, the more physical records? So let's get into a quick fire round. Scientists have estimated that the highest temperature, assuming an average level of humidity any human can survive for a substantial period of time, is around 60 degrees Celsius or 140 Fahrenheit, which itself is not a great fact when you consider that the highest naturally occurring temperature ever recorded was 56.7 degrees Celsius or 134 Fahrenheit. But that's not all of it. External temperature is only one thing. Human skin has evolved to be especially good at preventing the transfer of heat either into or out of our body, primarily because of the extremely specific body temperatures humans require. Whereas it has been estimated humans can withstand an external temperature of up to 60 degrees Celsius, it is known that an internal body temperature can become hypothermic and risk severe consequences if it were to reach just 38.3 degrees Celsius or 100.9 Fahrenheit. To date, no individual has tried to put a record on this front, probably because it would quickly become the deadliest record if they attempted it. On the flip side, though, low temperatures are actually very different. Even though hypothermia kicks in at around 35 Celsius or 95 Fahrenheit, doctors have demonstrated that individuals can train their body to tolerate lower temperatures, with the lowest internal body temperature ever recorded and then survived, ranking at 13 degrees Celsius or 55 Fahrenheit. Scientists still aren't exactly sure why the body can better survive cold than heat, but the current best explanation puts it down to the fact that as warm-blooded creatures we find it a lot easier to heat up than to cool down. Now let's cover some of the most painful records ever achieved, the ones to do with pregnancy. On this, we must go off the records, as there is no theoretical medical limit on how many babies a woman can have or how big the baby can be, with the most babies being born at once ranking in at 15, and the heaviest baby ever delivered ranking in at 23 pounds and 9 ounces or 10 kilograms. These, again, all being examples of where we don't know the human limit, but, well, dear God, let's hope it's not that much higher. So, where to go from discussing birth? Well, where else but horror shows? Specifically, the Russian sleep experiment is a well-known creepypasta, a scary story circulated on the internet that people absolutely promise is 100% true, which claims that in 1947 the Soviet Union subjected 5 test subjects to a series of experiments designed to keep them awake over 30 consecutive days. It is the claim of the story that after 15 they went insane and turned to barely humanoid creatures. But in reality, if a human were to go without sleep for that long, the result would be, well, death. It's not really understood how long a human can go without sleep, since it will probably depend on your diet and physical health, but it is known that most people cannot stay awake longer than 72 consecutive hours, and that no person has ever stayed awake for more than 264 hours or 11 days. This is definitely a record you should not give a try, though, as hallucinations are known to set in as soon as hour 70, and spontaneous death has been known as a high risk from hour 120 onwards. Now, what about the infamous one that most people already think they know? Food and water. How long can you go without food and water? Most people follow the rule of threes. That is, that the average person can go 3 minutes without air, 3 days without water, and 3 weeks without food. This is somewhat misleading, however. Scientifically, the answer to all three can vary greatly depending on your diet, general health, and whether you've done so before. The average person can go 4 minutes without air, but the world record ranks in at a breathtaking 24 minutes and 37 seconds. The average person can go anywhere from 2 to 4 days without water, but the world record is 18 days. And finally, the average person can go between 2 and 4 weeks without food, depending on how much fat there is on their body, but the world record is an impossible to swallow 392 days.